there, Ramblers, and welcome to a very, very special episode indeed of Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're all doing very well out there. Firstly, the weather forecast. It's a bit colder. Other than that, there's not really much else going on here in the UK. We haven't really had any rain or anything like that. I have a big tree outside now, which has dumped all of its leaves all over the place, so I've had to deal with that. And indeed, I say now because there have been some changes here at the studio, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail towards the end of this week's Ramble. But perhaps most obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, the backdrop has changed a little bit. The Doom Shrine has expanded to fill 2 shelves. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to go to 3 shelves, maybe just go full on, all out with the Doom Shrine. Not quite sure. And unfortunately, as kind of part of that whole process, there has been a victim, which is the Archvile here from Doom 2. Or indeed, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll probably see that this is actually half of the Archvile, with his little peachy bum cheeks there. And there's the other half. He's snapped in half. Now, thankfully, this isn't the original Reaper minifigurine set that id Software did way back in the 90s, because they are worth an absolute fortune to collectors. But no, this is the reissued version that Bethesda did a few years back. You can probably see my little Doom figurines there in the background. And the Archvile got snapped in half. And if you know your Doom 2 lore, you'll know that the Archvile, of course, has the ability to resurrect any of the other enemies. But not himself. So I guess that's up to me to stick him back together somehow. Not ideal, is it? But anyway, that does quite neatly, let's just chuck him over there out of the way, that does quite neatly lead me on to my first story for this week, which is indeed all about Doom. Some very, very big news, some big drama in the Doom community. So let's dive into that. Now, this is to do with GZDoom. Now, I appreciate that you're probably used to hearing American YouTubers saying GZDoom, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm British, as you know, in it, so we're going to go with GZDoom. So if that offends you, please feel free to skip this particular story, go to the next one. I don't need to know down in the comments, okay? Right, Doom modders fall into civil war as devs launch new engine in protest at GZDoom creators' leadership and use of ChatGPT. That's right. So GZDoom, of course, being a modern take on the Doom engine, which runs the Doom games. There have been some commercial games, of course, released based on GZDoom as well. It's that good of an engine. I'm just thinking Sulaco, I think was that GZDoom. I very much enjoyed that game. It shows off kind of some of the capabilities of that engine. Has gone well and truly, above and beyond what was possible in the original Doom. And of course, when it first started, it actually started as ZDoom way back in the day, or ZDoom if you like. And it was one developer's attempt to add basically OpenGL rendering to that. And now that developer has gone off the rails a bit, had a bit of a falling out with the community, and the community have said, enough is enough. We're going to make our own fork of this and take it to the next chapter without you, which is quite noteworthy, of course, and not the first drama that this developer has been involved with. So this new fork is called GZDoom. And it says here on rockpapershotgun.com, Edwin Evans Thirlwell is the author of this story. Very happy-looking chappy there. GZDoom fork to offer a more stable development structure with healthy collaboration. And I wasn't aware of the story. Of course, I've used GZDoom quite a bit over the years and played a lot of games that are based on it, but I wasn't aware of the story behind the scenes, what was going on with the developers and all the drama and infighting and all of that stuff. I did see a very, very good video on it this morning, which I will link and we'll have a little bit of a look at in a second. But before we get distracted, let's go through the rest of this story on Rock, Paper, Shotgun. So the future of GZDoom, the community updated engine behind many thousands of brilliant Doom mods, is in doubt following a bust-up over the lead developer's use of generative AI to create code. The fracas, what a great word, has seen a number of GZDoom developers announce plans to splinter off and maintain their own engine, GZDoom. New to GZDoom, it's a fork of Doom source port ZDoom, first released by Christoph Olkers, aka Grafazal, back in 2005. A vast number of Doom modding projects make use of it, including such RPS headliners as literary horror myhouse.wad. Fantastic mod, by the way, I will say, just a little diversion for a second. Well worth checking out, or at least watching a video on this. There's a video of John Romero playing it, of course, one of the creators of Doom, which I can highly recommend. I'm not going to say I'm going to link to it down below because I'll probably forget. Demon petting add-on Kako Friendo pictured. Oh, right, okay. That's not one I've heard of. And unofficial Wolfenstein 3D sequel, Blade of Agony. As reported by Gaming on Linux, a moderator recently posted on Discord about strife between Ulkers and various members of the community. Due to a conflict between GZDoom's lead developer / maintainer Grafazal, a lot of other developers decided to leave GZDoom and work on a new fork of the engine, now known as UZDoom. They write. The fracas, that's that word again, appears to be only partly to do with Ulker's usage of ChatGPT. Going by the chat on Discord and elsewhere, the backlash is fueled by long-term misgivings, that's another great word, about his bulldozing leadership style. Aside from replicating all of GZDoom's features, the Discord moderator post continues, the UZDoom rebels aim to offer a more stable development structure with healthy collaboration and less power given to individual project leads. There's a poll here about your favourite anime game. Not quite sure what that's got to do with anything, but further investigation takes us to this GitHub page for a GZDoom update that features some code by Ulkers derived from ChatGPT. It has spawned a comments thread full of people arguing about the generative AI financial bubble and the ethics and utility of coding with Gen AI. Ulkers has both defended his use of ChatGPT, arguing that a lot of programmers secretly deploy large language learning models for smaller tasks, and offhandedly invited the angry users to fork the engine and work on their own version. Anyway, there's a bit more information about this, of course, with the author here, Edwin, stating that this is indeed quite worrying for the future of, of course, GZDoom and Doom modders. Although it is all open source, so, it will survive in some form or another. But yeah, that video that I mentioned earlier, if you're not up to speed on all of the background, like I say, I consider myself to be quite a big fan of Doom, and I do keep up to date on the latest games and things that are being released on this platform, but I wasn't aware at all of all of the drama behind this, and it is actually really interesting. I don't usually go for drama, but I did find this quite interesting. There's a video here on a channel called D-Wars, something like that. The GZDoom AI code controversy. Now, if you, it's a 12-minute long video. I stuck it on this morning when I was kind of getting ready for work and stuff. And it just talks about the history of this particular developer, this lead developer, and, his history of kind of being quite stubborn, I think it's fair to say, and causing quite a bit of controversy with his fellow developers on the project, and how it has all kind of culminated in this. There's also... what's one thing? Yeah, texture filtering. Apparently that was a really big controversial change that it was enabled by default, and the very first thing that the UZDoom team have done is to disable that, and apparently even that little move has been enough to get a lot of people on board. So basically, and I do urge you to go and watch this video, but essentially it's just a basic function that detects whether someone's running their desktop environment in dark mode on Linux, and then obviously changes some of the user interface elements as a result of that. And it's a very simple function, and basically the developer used ChatGPT to generate this function and was transparent about it in the code. Somebody else spotted it, flagged it. It led to this whole discussion, which also then led to a load of their kind of past arguments and stuff being dragged up again. And that was enough for people to say, no, enough is enough, and we're going to start our own fork, our own version of this. So there you go. First story for this week. Some Doom drama, not only in the form of my arch-vile mini figurine being snapped in half violently, but also, perhaps quite more importantly, GZDoom and the future of that project being cast into doubt with this new fork, or perhaps a fresh new beginning that's going to lead to some exciting developments. Whichever way you choose to look at it, it's certainly a big story this week. And there you go. Quite a good one to kick off this week's Ramble. But first, just before we dive into our second story, of course we have to say a very quick thank you to our sponsor, PCBWay.com, who have indeed been sponsors of Reese Rambles and my main channel, Control.Reese, for quite a while now, and they've always been absolutely fantastic to work with and provide a very useful service to this community, which they've been doing for the past 11 years, which I think is very noteworthy. So, PCBWay, if you're not familiar with them somehow by now, of course, offer PCB fabrication services and also have recently started offering some additional services like 3D printing, injection molding, sheet metal fabrication, and CNC machining. And of course, they have become very well known for their quick turnaround times, their very reasonable prices, and their excellent quality control process. So if any of those things are a requirement for your next project, please do check out the link to PCBWay down in the description. And once more, big thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring Reese Rambles, and indeed my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese. So that was very much a sponsor spot, which I do get paid for. But this next story, I am not being paid for, despite the fact that I am about to wax lyrical about something that you can go out and buy. And I do have a personal connection to this as well. I will say, just to be fully transparent with you in the interests of disclosure, this is a thing that is run by some good friends of mine who I have come to know very well. And I just want to see it succeed because they have done wonderful things for the retro community. The fact that my friends doesn't really factor into it, I'd probably be giving this a big shout out as well because it is a very cool thing. But it just so happens that I have also written some magazine articles for these people over the years. And if I was better prepared, I would have had the magazines here to show to you, but I don't. So, yeah, there's that. But of course, I am talking about Addict Media and their print magazines, Pixel Addict and Amiga Addict, which you can actually go out and you can buy in the shops in physical form. Now, why am I talking about them? Why am I giving them free publicity? Well, of course, it is the 40th anniversary of the Commodore Amiga this year, which is something that I have talked about in previous rambles. And it is also, coincidentally, the 40th issue of Amiga Addict, which is their magazine, of course, all about the Amiga. And so, in a stroke of genius, they have decided to do a one-off special commemorating this. And they have done it in a way that will be massively nostalgic for any Amiga owners who were around in the UK in the 90s. So, this is the triumphant return for one and only issue of Amiga Format. That's right, the biggest selling computer magazine of the mid-90s at one point for quite a few years. Of course, the Amiga was absolutely massive in the UK, and indeed so were computing magazines, the series of Format magazines from Future Publishing. I will say that I was very firmly in the other camp, the Atari ST camp, as you may know. And indeed, we did used to get ST Format, their Atari ST magazine, the sister magazine to this one. So what they've done for this is they have, as I say, they have brought back the name Amiga Format for this issue. And they're also including a cover disc, which is really very cool, very good touch. And of course, a big kind of throwback to those wonderful days when you used to get the cover disc. Of course, long before the internet, you used to get all of your demos and things. Quite often they'd include a full version of a program or something on there as well, or a game, something a bit older or whatever. And they were a bit of a lifeline, I will say, for those of us who had these computers back in the day, because they were kind of pretty much the only way we could get hold of software for them. So cool to see that they've done this, and a very inspired and ironic choice of software, I will say, because they've gone with Xcopy, which of course was responsible for quite a bit of piracy back in the day. But this is an officially licensed version that they are, of course, Xcopy is still owned by someone. Apologies for not knowing off the top of my head. I'm not an Amiga person, but I did ask them, and this is a proper licensed copy of that. So for your £5, you get the floppy disk, which of course they've had to create and thoroughly test themselves by hand with their very small, very kind of cash-strapped team. There are no floppy disk duplication houses left in the world, unfortunately, so they've had to do it all themselves off their own backs, using old kind of new old stock disks. And I think, for £5 for the novelty of it, and also to support these guys in what they're doing, I'd go for the floppy disk as well. So £8 for the magazine, £1.77 shipping in the UK, £5 for the floppy disk. It is a substantial publication, as you will probably be aware if you are a regular reader of any of the Addict magazines. And I'll just quickly mention they have interviewed a few people from the Amiga world. They've got Sam Dicker, who is famously the designer of the Boing Ball, which they have featured on the front cover here, which it was like a 3D demo thing that was quite popular back in the days of the Amiga. Featured on an episode of the Computer Chronicles, no less. Also, a story about the upcoming release of the Settlers 2, which has very recently been ported to the Amiga officially. I talked about that a couple of rambles back. There's a story about Putty and one of the best best known games on the Amiga, and a load of other stuff. They do have a scan of the contents page here, but it's very, very tiny, and I can't read any of that. Anyway, what have they got here? It's a load of good stuff about the Amiga. Anyway, there you go. That is Amiga Format from the makers of Amiga Addict and Pixel Addict magazines. You can go to their website, addict.media. You can buy the magazine. Not a sponsored thing, just love these guys, and I think there's a lot of Amiga owners out there who will get a real kick out of this. So I wanted to let you know about it. And that's that. Now, right at the top of this ramble, as I always do in these things, I declared that, of course, this podcast has a focus on vintage and retro. And people quite often ask me why I feel the need to clarify or specify those two terms separately, as a lot of people do use them interchangeably. Just for the record, just to fill out this little segment a little bit, I would consider vintage to be anything that is actually old, and retro to be anything new that is in the style of something old. So, for example, the original Atari 2600, released way back in 1977, I would consider to be vintage. And the Atari 2600 Plus, which was released a couple of years ago, runs all those original cartridges and things and looks very much the same. In fact, I have one up on the shelf here. I would consider that to be retro. But to be honest, I'm not going to get my knickers in a twist if people do mix those terms up or use them in a slightly different way. There's far more important things going on in the world. Anyway, of course, this is a vintage and retro podcast, but I do find cause to talk about modern stuff on a fairly regular basis because, of course, it does have an impact on this community. And there has been some very, very big news this week in the world of Windows, Microsoft Windows. So we'll go straight to Microsoft's website and take a look at this. Windows 10 support has ended, and that was on October the 14th, which as of the time of recording was 3 days ago. So Windows 10 has reached the end of support on October the 14th, 2025. At this point, technical assistance, feature updates, and security updates is no longer provided. Good grammar there, Microsoft. If you have devices running Windows 10, we recommend upgrading them to Windows 11, a more modern, secure, and highly efficient computing experience. If devices do not meet the technical requirements to run Windows 11, we recommend that you enroll in the Windows 10 Consumer Extended Security Updates program or replace the device with one that supports Windows 11. Now, this is going to be a topic of an upcoming video of mine over on my main channel because I have, one of the companies that I work with has a huge pile of decommissioned PCs now that they have had to get rid of because they are not supported by Windows 11 and because their IT support company don't seem to recognize the existence of anything other than Microsoft. And it's not viable for them to put Linux on them and use them in that way, even though they're all perfectly good hardware. And to be honest, well, I mean, this is a family-friendly podcast, and I don't swear here, but I think that is a pretty ridiculous situation, and I want to take that pile of old machines and do something useful with them. So watch this space on that, or indeed watch my other space over on Control-Alt-Reese. But yeah, there are some options here if you are still running Windows 10. I will say I do have quite a high-end gaming PC, which you might be familiar with, that I use for playing. The Hexen remaster at the moment is actually what I'm playing on it, so it is massively wasted on me, but I do use it for current gen stuff. Obviously Stalker 2, I've played through that quite recently. Talos Principle 2, I've been playing the Tony Hawk remasters, that kind of thing. And I recently went from Windows 10, in anticipation of this, to Bazzite, which I did cover quite extensively over on my main channel earlier this year. And I've had no problems with it whatsoever. It runs fantastically well. It runs all of the Windows stuff completely seamlessly. And some of the older Windows stuff on Steam that doesn't, that's kind of unsupported and doesn't run under modern Windows, actually that all runs perfectly seamlessly. So it's actually a better experience than playing this stuff on Windows. I love Bazzite. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So if you are worried about you have a dedicated gaming PC and literally all you do is play Steam games on it, or indeed GOG games, they're all supported, stuff like that. I've covered all of that over on my main channel. I do highly recommend moving to Bazzite, and I will take this opportunity to give it a big shout out because there is no better opportunity than this. But if you want to stick with Windows 10, and I can't say I blame you because I'm not a fan of Windows 11 with all of its Copilot rubbish and all the rest of it. Of course, that is also, they have also added that to Windows 10, haven't they? But you can get the Extended Security Updates program. Now, that costs money if you are outside of the EU and the UK. But for those of us here in the UK, we do get an extra, and indeed the EU, we do get an extra year's worth of security updates for free, which does kick the can down the road by a whole 12 months. So if you do go to update your Windows 10 PC now, if you go into the start menu and go to the Windows Update thing, you will be presented with an option. If you are in the US or indeed anywhere else, it will charge you money. And if you are here in the UK or the EU, you basically just have to click a button to confirm that you want to enroll in that program, and it is free. So that is actually quite cool of Microsoft, despite the fact that they have generated this enormous mountain of e-waste for everyone else, including business users. There are a few different options. I will leave you to research those yourself. Like I say, if it's a desktop PC and all you use it for is basic internet stuff, Linux, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, something like that, well worth looking into. Or indeed, if it's a gaming PC, Bazzite with that Steam picture mode, the gaming mode and everything built in. Of course, there's Windows 11, there's the Extended Update program, so we're not completely stuck. But yeah, always sad to see the end of an era and the death of a version of Windows, a major version of Windows. Of course, always big news in the computing world. And I must say, Windows 10, kind of a personal favourite of mine over the years, actually. I think it's been one of the better ones. Can't say the same for 11 based on my very limited experience with it. I'm sure there's plenty of you down in the comments who are saying, actually, no, it's perfectly fine. Why is everyone complain about Windows 11? Well, I don't like it. You know what? If people don't like things, leave them to not like things and be grumpy. That's what I say. Anyway, that's that. Windows 10 support has officially ended, so if you are still on Windows 10, you need to make a decision to either pay for those updates, opt into the free extended update program if you are in the UK or the EU for 12 months, or perhaps look into an alternative OS. Hacks have been quite big news this year, with some very big companies being hit. Here in the UK, outside of the kind of computing and gaming industries, we've had Marks and Spencer, that's a huge retailer. They were hacked quite early on this year and are still in the process of trying to put their IT systems back together and get everything back up and running properly. Jaguar Land Rover, of course, the car manufacturer based just down the road from me. They've been down for a couple of months now. They've had to stop all of their manufacturing, which has had a knock-on effect on all of their suppliers. A lot of people losing their jobs and companies shutting down, the government stepping in to provide funding to try and keep everything afloat. They're only just starting to get their operations back up and running again. Hacking has been big business, and of course the computer industry and the gaming industry has also found themselves on the receiving end of this. Most recently, Nintendo. So this was announced back on Monday of this week, so it just missed last week's Ramble. But there has been a statement yesterday from Nintendo themselves as well. So, of course, big news, big news in the gaming world. So, the story here on NintendoLife.com, the original story from Monday, reads, Notorious group Crimson Collective claims to have hacked Nintendo. And Nintendo is known to be extremely litigious when it comes to protecting its intellectual property, writes Ollie Reynolds on NintendoLife.com. But the company may have quite the battle on its hands if recent claims are proven to be legitimate. Hacking group Crimson Collective has claimed to have breached Nintendo in what may be one of the most high-profile hacks in quite some time. The group has included an alleged screenshot, let's just open this up, as proof of its actions, which includes a bunch of folders related to production assets, admin, previews, and more at Nintendo. At the time of writing, Nintendo itself has not issued a statement on the alleged attack, so it's difficult to ascertain the legitimacy of these claims for the time being. We've reached out for comment, and we'll update you if we hear back. And it just goes on to say that apparently Crimson Collective hacked Red Hat earlier on this year. The big Linux company, have been around since the 90s, kind of one of the old stalwarts of the Linux world. and managed to get their hands on 570 gigabytes worth of GitHub repositories. And there's some speculation that this might be what they've done with Nintendo as well. Not quite sure why Nintendo would be using GitHub for their version control, but you never know. You'd think they'd have their own kind of in-house hosted solution. But anyway, this is that screenshot that I mentioned. Cyber Alert, Japan, Nintendo, and we can see we've got some folders with Nintendo-related names here. Nothing particularly interesting looking, I guess. Now, there has been an official reply, as I mentioned, from Nintendo. So let's have a look at that. Again, over on nintendolife.com by Liam Doolan this time. Nintendo responds to reported Crimson Collective hack with official statement. No sensitive data appears to have been compromised. That's kind of the thrust of their message. Last week, the hacking group Crimson Collective claimed it had breached Nintendo. At the time, there was no official response from the video game giant. Now, in an update, Nintendo has shared a statement with the Sankei Shimbun. The Sankei Shimbun. I guess that's, what's that, a Japanese news outlet, I guess? And it appears to suggest that there's been no personal, development, or business-related leaks. No personal data, no development data, and no business-related. Oh, what's left? Just like basic admin stuff? Don't know. Interesting stuff. Anyway, external servers displaying Nintendo's website have reportedly been compromised, but apparently there's apparently no evidence of this impacting customers or the company. Here's a rough translation, including the statement shared on the 15th of October, 2025. Nintendo responded to an interview with the Sankei Shimbun on the 15th, saying we have not confirmed any leak of personal information, and there has been no leak of development or business information. Some external servers that display Nintendo's website were defaced, but the company said there was no evidence of damage to customers or intrusion into the company. So at this stage, there's allegedly no evidence of sensitive data or secrets being leaked, and it seems it's not a major breach. This update follows the news earlier this week about the supposed hacker behind the Pokemon Terra leak, reportedly leaking the new game's source code and beta builds. So I guess we'll take a look at that as well, because of course, the new Pokemon game was also hacked and leaked. Of course, Pokemon Legends may have already leaked online, but that apparently isn't devastating enough for Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. Now the alleged hacker behind last year's Terra leak, in which huge amounts of data had leaked online, has now supposedly returned and released Legends ZA's source code, beta builds, including 2 from the PC and 3 from the Switch, and around 10 gigabytes of related documentation. So there is a leak that apparently includes some in-game features that were scrapped for the final game. And one of these is that the windows and balconies seen on the infamous in-game buildings were once much more detailed and were actually modeled correctly rather than being simple flat assets. I guess that's an optimization thing. So the game released this week on the Switch and the Switch 2, running at 60 FPS on the Switch 2. But yeah, not good news for Nintendo just lately. All of these high-profile hacks and things. Of course, I reported on that Terra leak last year, but interesting to see that there has also been a development from that, unconnected to this latest hack. But yeah, all just a bit of a mess. I think it's fair to say. Probably not the last high-profile hack we will have this year. Seems that this one is very low impact, but you never know. Of course, this is Nintendo we're talking about. This is the whole kind of Japanese culture as well around this stuff. Maybe we'll see some more come about as a result of this, maybe not, but still very noteworthy in its own right. So, I think that all that's left to say is stay safe out there, make sure your cybersecurity is all up to date, your disaster recovery and all the rest of it, and try not to lose any sleep. So I want to take a moment to talk about some news from DOSBox, a very interesting individual indeed, and thoroughly nice person who I met at a show down at the Cambridge Computer Museum last year. And we went over all of DOSBox's projects to do with the Apple II, the Apple Lisa, basically creating kind of modern clones of those systems, upgraded versions of those. Really, really fascinating stuff. It is covered in my video of that event, and it's something we need to get together and kind of talk about properly, I think, and give some kind of more coverage to. But DOSBox has drawn my attention to some A very interesting project here, which I haven't been able to find any coverage of over on across the internet. And this is also an unlisted video as well. So this is kind of somewhat of an exclusive, I guess. Sorry for burying it so far into this week's Ramble, but it was posted on the Ramble Submissions channel over on my Discord server. So I guess it's okay to talk about this. And I will just read the post as it was posted over there. So it might be interesting to look into. But Alex, who reverse engineered most of the Apple Lisa boards, have gone above and beyond and have started developing an FPGA implementation of the Lisa. Still very much a work in progress, and the video is pretty technical, but it's effectively a Lisa 2 in an FPGA with all of the peripherals hanging off it. And this is the video that that's posted by DOSBox is referencing. I do have a story about DOSBox in a minute, actually. That's why I'm tripping over my words. But yeah, as we can see here, we have a Xilinx FPGA development board. And this is running the Apple Lisa core. Now, of course, the Apple Lisa was the predecessor to the original Macintosh and was an incredibly complex and expensive machine in its own right. Was it the first? Does it count as the first consumer GUI-driven machine? I'm probably going to get some flack for that in the comments, probably deservedly so. But certainly a massively ambitious project for Apple. Wasn't a commercial success, partly, I guess, because of the price, but of course directly led to the Macintosh, which kind of refined those ideas. And, well, hey, it's, how many years later, and I'm sat here recording this on an Apple Mac. So, guess they did something right. Now, as DOSBox quite rightly said, this is a very technical video indeed, and it's not one that I did give it a quick look the other day, but I must admit I need to really sit down and watch this properly and to take the time to absorb all of the information in this. But this is a very impressive achievement. Of course, the Apple Lisa, now available as, or certainly shortly will be available in an FPGA-based implementation. Of course, those FPGA chips, field programmable gate arrays, which run the Mister project, the analog consoles. They basically allow developers to replicate actual chips at a kind of hardware logic level, which allows for a very, very accurate replication of the functionality of some of those machines. In the case of the Mister project, you can load up all of your cores for your various consoles and computers and things, everything from your Mega Drive, your SNES, your Atari STs and Amigas and things, up to the Sega Saturn even. There's an Atari Jaguar core in development. Really impressive what people have managed to do with these. But the Lisa and stuff like it, which are very, very rare in their own right, and quite rightly so, I think some of the most important projects as far as preservation is concerned, because of course it's very, very difficult for people to experience these machines in the flesh themselves and actually use them and know what they were like to use. There are emulators and things out there available, of course, but to have this replicated in such a kind of authentic way it's fair to say, very, very important. So a very important project here from Alex. Really great to see. And I will check with DOSBox that it is okay to share this video, because like I say, it is unlisted and I don't know Alex. I don't think I've ever spoken to Alex. But it would be cool to get this information out there. But nevertheless, you're at least now aware of it and have at least seen some of this video. So, yeah, doing my bit for the retro community. Also go and check out DOSBox's work, of course, with the Apple II, the Lisa, the Macintosh, all sorts of really interesting reverse engineering projects. And thank you very, very much for posting this over on the Discord and making me aware of it. Because as you know, I love this stuff. So from DOSBox to DOSBox next. Yep, now you can see why I'm getting myself confused. And DOSBox is an emulator for DOS, for MS-DOS, of course, which runs on all of the modern platforms. It's a really great project. It's one that I am a huge fan of. And of course, I have used it extensively for bits of video capture, testing things out, that kind of thing. It's such a valuable thing for game preservation and pretty much runs pretty much anything you might want to run under DOS. And I have been made aware over on the Discord server, so thank you ever so much for this, this week, of a new fork of the DOSBox project, which adds some very interesting features indeed. So I also wanted to let you guys know about this. So this video is DOSBox Pure Unleashed, coming soon on the channel Cyraven. Let's just hit play on this, and indeed, DOSBox Pure is the name of the project. And this is adding some very interesting new features. They aren't listed here, so I'm going to have to try to remember from watching this video the other day. But the biggest feature that's being touted here, as you can see in this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, is that you can package DOS games up as zip files, and then you can essentially just drag and drop them into the emulator, and they will just run pre-configured, pre-packaged. Of course, we've seen very similar pre-packaged DOS games from the likes of GOG.com in the past, and they are absolutely fantastic. I think it goes without saying. But this just makes the whole process of playing these DOS games a lot more streamlined and a lot easier, because of course MS-DOS is quite the complex beast for those people who don't have any hands-on experience with it. Before everything was kind of shiny and new and user-friendly. When it comes to emulating consoles and things, of course, we have disk images, we have ISOs and things like that. But DOS was a very, very different animal indeed. So yeah, always good to see efforts being made to try to make those games as accessible as possible. Very, very important thing for game preservation. So as we can see, as we run through this video, and this will be linked in the usual places, we do have some other really cool features. We've got gamepad emulation, mouse emulation, we've got an on-screen keyboard, all kind of aimed at making this as easy as possible for people wanting to play DOS games on, on consoles, for example. Support for save states, which is really nice to see. Fast forward and slow motion, I'm just going to very quickly go through this. We've got advanced MIDI emulation as well, so stuff like your MT32s, your Sound Canvas, those cool MIDI devices from back in the day. Now very accurately emulated and very, very easy to use in DOSBox Pure. And they've got upscaling on 3DFX Voodoo games, so you can actually play those in 4K now. And some of the footage from these, they show Tomb Raider and stuff like that running on here. And it looks absolutely brilliant. It looks really, really nice. Of course, the Voodoo games, another quite a hard, hard thing to emulate as far as traditional emulators are concerned. So great to see efforts being made in that world. And as you can now see, again, if you are watching this on YouTube, support for Windows 95 and Windows 98. Now, as far as I was concerned, you can't install 95 or indeed 98 in DOSBox. It's been quite a few years since I looked into that, so maybe that is a thing that you can do now. But this DOSBox Pure Unleashed is touting its advanced support for Windows 95 and Windows 98 as well. And indeed, all of those wonderful games available on those, Windows 9X platforms. So I think this is going to be a pretty big thing in the world of DOSBox. It's not been released yet, but I will link to the video for you in the usual places, as I always say. And if you check out the description for that, there are some links to various bits and pieces. There's an itch page, which isn't active at the moment, but will be in the very near future. And also a GitHub. There's an official Discord, and you can follow them on Mastodon and Blue Sky if you want to keep up to date with the project. But yeah, really, really cool. My hat is off to Cyraven for this project. And it's certainly one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And hopefully we'll be able to get my hands on in the future. Maybe I'll do a bit of a video about it when it launches, actually. Yeah, get some good video ideas in this week's Ramble, if nothing else. So this next story follows on rather nicely from that previous one, in which, of course, I mentioned GOG.com, those prolific users of DOSBox. If you're not familiar with GOG or Good Old Games, they are a storefront that sell all sorts of fantastic old PC games from the DOS and kind of early Windows eras, all packaged up rather nicely so you can run them seamlessly and painlessly on your modern system, which quite often isn't the case if you go out and find the original copies of those games, because well, things change. And I've always been a huge supporter of GOG. I own hundreds of games on there myself, which I have bought over the years in some of their fantastic sales. Again, I'm not shilling here. We should probably call this the shilling episode, shouldn't we? But yeah, another story from Rock Paper Shotgun next, which I thought was quite interesting. And it's a bit of an update on their preservation program, GOG's preservation program, which I covered on a previous Ramble earlier this year. And they have run into some problems with it, but they are still committed to it. It's just meant that they haven't quite met some of their rather ambitious goals, and they're being very transparent about it and talking about some of the reasons behind that, which is always great to see. So, this story here on Rock Paper Shotgun by Mark Warren. The headline here, GOG say their preservation program has been harder than we thought, thanks to DRM and elusive creators. Of course, DRM, digital rights management, anti-piracy stuff, and GOG have a very firm commitment to not including anything of the like in any of their releases, despite the fact that some of these older game developers are quite insistent upon it and kind of cling to it, or indeed they used DRM schemes back in the day that are very difficult to crack or to work around nowadays to kind of re-release and repackage these games. And that is indeed one of the issues that they have mentioned as being a bit of a hurdle to this preservation program. So, anyway, the article reads, given how quickly older games can be delisted or end up near impossible to run properly without tinkering nowadays, efforts like GOG.com's preservation program are always nice to see. There's obviously a money-making motive behind it for the storefront, but keeping retro works in working order's a noble way to earn that cash. As it turns out, though, the folks behind the CD Projekt-owned site underestimated just how difficult an undertaking the program would be. That's not to suggest they're giving up, though, just that they've had to reevaluate some of their ambitious early goals. To be perfectly honest, it's harder than we thought it would be, GOG Senior Business Development Manager Marcin Paczynski told The Game Business. Apologies for pronunciation on that. What we found out is that the games and how they work has deteriorated way faster than what we thought, and we are not talking only about the game not launching. We're talking about more subtle things as well, like the game not supporting modern controllers, or the game not supporting ultra widescreen or modern resolutions, or even a simple thing like being able to minimize the game, which is an essential feature today. Modern gamers expect to be able to minimize the game and then bring it up without issues. So yes, this preservation program, of course, being their commitment to making these games not only available, but also as seamless and easy to use as possible for modern gamers, so they can continue to enjoy them on their modern systems for years to come. So, back to the story. It's turned out that the sellers have had more work on their hands than they anticipated to bring older games up to the standards that we defined. As you might expect, that's led to the revamped games pot not filling up at quite the rapid rate GOG predicted, with the preservation program now forecasted to end 2025 with somewhere between 300 and 350 titles, rather than the 500 originally set as a goal. As of writing, it's 232 games strong. So I will say, not a failure at all. They had a very ambitious target indeed of trying to get 500 games preserved as part of this program by the end of 2025, and they're on track for somewhere between 300 and 350, with 232 done so far. So a little bit behind schedule, but certainly not a failure by anyone's standards, and I think they are doing fantastic work. So anyway, back to the story here, and there's a name that I definitely can't pronounce, so apologies for this, but the managing director of GOG, who has a very Polish-looking name, also picked out the ancient DRM tech old games have often been saddled with as a headache when it comes to performing these updates, suggesting that companies should consider making the DRM easier to ditch once it's protected the game around launch. The other side of that coin, of course, is that companies will always want to cover their own backs. Convincing them to compromise early on in the name of a future comeback project surely resembles a chat with a tie-wearing brick wall in a lot of cases. Of course, DRM, the reason these, the vast majority of sales, as far as games are concerned, are in the first few weeks after launch, and that's really when the DRM matters, and the games not ending up on piracy sites, in those crucial first few weeks. As we know, I don't think there's ever been a case where DRM's actually worked and prevented that from happening. All it generally does is make legitimate gamers' lives more difficult, in my opinion. And certainly when they're still clinging onto it 20, 30, 40 years later and making the game difficult to preserve, I think it is a huge issue. And that is certainly something that GOG have run into. Anyway, finally, Paczynski picked out a couple of cases which have been seen getting the rights to preserve games present a different challenge than simply convincing a lawyer people still dig classic Resi. I think it's difficult to pass that sentence. Anyway, among other things, we'll move on. GOG have hunted down ex-shooter devs turned Texan oil magnates and hired a private investigator to track down one bloke living totally off the grid who'd inherited the rights to some games. Living the dream. Imagine you're living in a tent in the wilds of somewhere like the Scottish Highlands As you snooze, the zip gently winds down, startling you into fight or flight mode. It's Tom Selleck. Oi, people want to play Links, the challenge of golf, without running into weird popping audio, he declares. You reach into an old tin and hand him a bit of paper which reads, do what you want with it. He leaves, you accidentally forget to check that none of the berries you've picked for breakfast are poisonous. I do love Rock, Paper, Shotgun. They've been around forever, haven't they? Such a good site. Anyway, there you go. The GOG preservation program is doing rather well. Not quite as well as their initially very ambitious targets predicted, but hey, 232 games as part of that program so far. Predicted to preserve 300 to 350 games in total by the end of 2025. It's certainly not something to be sniffed at. And it's great. I will just say that it is great that they are, they are doing this vital work in preserving these games for people to be able to, to enjoy for generations to come. And I'm going to keep buying them. So, my hat is off to you, GOG.com. Great stuff. And that, my dearest Ramblers, brings us around rather neatly to my regular Videos of the Week feature, wherein I feature videos that I have seen here on the YouTubes in the previous week that have educated, entertained, enlightened, or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Quite often they are retro and vintage computer and technology related, quite often they aren't. And first, I want to start with a bit of a correction, perhaps not a correction, but a bit of an update on last week's videos, or at least one of the videos. And this was this Technology Connextras video, of course, Alec from Technology Connections, his second channel, where he talks about some DVD box sets that he picked up and how the later releases of those were much lower bitrate and much lower quality than the earlier versions that he had in his collection. And what quite a few people pointed out in the comments, now I will say, I watched this on my TV at home, so I didn't actually read the comments on this video, and I probably should have, because it turns out that what he has here are more than likely bootleg copies, bootleg box sets, which of course would have been churned out by some factory in the Far East or somewhere, when these box sets were new, when they were current, and they would have taken the original discs and ripped them and, put them out on much, much cheaper single-layer DVDs as a way of kind of releasing these bootleg box sets. Now, what I will say, and what Alec has said in the top pinned comment, which I will say was 7 days ago, so I'm not sure if this comment would have even been there when I recorded the Ramble. But yeah, of course, this is still important. The message of the video, even though the assumption that these were later official releases turns out not to be true, I think the message of the video is still important. That you need to look out for those the kind of the more elaborate box sets with the multiple discs and all the artwork and everything else, because they are going to be the better quality releases. But anyway, it's just video of the week. It's not that important, but I thought I would mention that because it has been mentioned to me, and quite a few people in the comments on that video did mention that. Now, let's talk about another bootleg thing next, another scam, I guess, because this is another video I watched this week, which I thought was quite interesting. And it's on BigClive.com. I do love a bit of Big Clive. Of course, he's known for his teardowns of various electronic devices. He's a bit of an electronics genius and very good at kind of explaining how these things work in detail and why quite often these things aren't quite what they seem. Now, this is a phone battery booster that's sold in China, apparently, on some markets and things. And it's not a thing that I was familiar with at all. But apparently, when your phone gets a bit old and, of course, your battery life is a fraction of what it used to be, you can connect it up to one of these things and it will do some kind of magic, some kind of voodoo magic with the battery that extends the life of the battery and makes it what it used to be. And as you might expect with Big Clive, he points out in this video that this is absolutely not what it seems. And he shows off the insides of this device and how it works, and it's hilarious. So I don't want to spoil that for you. It's a 6-minute video, 6 minutes, 21 seconds. Big Clive is always a joy to spend some time with. His videos, I think he's really kind of jolly character, a really well-spoken guy, and very knowledgeable as well, like I say. So please do go and watch that if you get the chance. But not a device I was familiar with, and it turns out that, it's a scam, which is always quite amusing to see. Now, on the topic of gaming, here's a video I watched this morning. Oddly enough, when I woke up, I stuck YouTube on, and I decided to sit and watch this. One of my favourite channels, Matt Casey, of course, a huge name in the game preservation world, but also very, very knowledgeable about game history and all of that side of things as well. And this is a really interesting technical video about how GTA San Andreas was broken by a Windows 11 update. So the Windows release of this game, of course, it's been around for a very, very long time now. When was San Andreas released? Like early 2000s? And how it's been working perfectly fine over these years. There is a mod as well. Is it called the Silent mod? Something like that. Yeah, Silent patch. This has led to a whole can of worms being opened, because this game was working fine with this patch on Windows 11 up until the point when it stopped working, and the developer of the patch tested it on their own machine and it was still working fine on their machine, and then it turned out it was because there was an update that they hadn't had and Microsoft had changed something, and it's just kind of a really fascinating look. Oh, sponsor spot, skip that. Just a really fascinating look at some of these internal decisions at Microsoft and how they can lead to some of these older games and programs and things being broken inadvertently, and just this huge backwards compatibility nightmare that Microsoft has in trying to keep things up to date and maintained. And not only has Silent, who publishes the Silent patch, chipped in with some really good technical details about how this all came to be, but Raymond Chen, who actually was a developer at Microsoft and has a really well-known development, a really well-known blog covering some of the inside information on that side of things, has also now chipped in on this and given Microsoft's side of the story. So if you check out the description of this video and the links there and want to do some further reading, it's just a bit of a rabbit hole, and I thought it was great. Really like Matt Casey anyway. He has a very good way of explaining these things, and is again very knowledgeable about this stuff, the kind of stuff that I like to watch, and I assume the kind of stuff that you like to watch too. So there we go. They're my videos of the week. We have this one from Big Clive about this scam phone battery booster at 6 minutes and 21 seconds. I'll leave you to check out the big reveal of the internals yourself, because it was quite shocking. And also how Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was broken by a Windows 11 update. Another quite short one for you here, 14 minutes and 6 seconds from Matt Casey. Please do go and subscribe to both of those channels as well, because they are fantastic channels. And also, if you do click on the links down in the description or in the podcast show notes, maybe let them know in the comments that Reese sent you. Get the good word out there. Anyway, that's videos of the week. And finally, I mentioned at the top of this week's Ramble that there had been some quite major changes here at the studio in the past couple of weeks, and that I would talk about it by the end of this week's episode. And that's what I'm doing right now. So if you are a supporter of mine, a channel member of Control-Alt-Reese, or a patron, you will have seen a bit of a behind-the-scenes video about this. And I'm going to show you some of that video now. So be prepared for a bit of reception here, because I recorded it in the exact same format as I do with these rambles. And indeed, from the old studio, because this is a new studio. I'm in a new location. I've moved. It's much, much bigger and better, as you will see. It's also closer to where I'm living nowadays, which makes life a hell of a lot easier. I'm not quite fully moved over. I am actually going to pop over there as soon as I finish recording this to go and fetch some more of my stuff. And I'll probably be there over the weekend as well. I've got until the end of October, and then I'm essentially done at the old studio, and this will be my new home. Now, there will be a video about this, talking about the renovation and stuff. This room is, it's painted, it's got new carpet tiles, and it's looking quite respectable now compared to what you're about to see in this video. But it is by no means anywhere near finished. I've also clad this wall. I've had to like put some battens up on the wall to screw my old studio backdrop to. There'll be a lot more information about that in the video, but as my faithful ramblers, I thought I would give you the exclusive and indeed the first video officially recorded at the new studio. So this is it. How exciting. That's why everything looks and sounds ever so slightly different. Because it was literally this morning I finally got everything hooked up, including my internet access, of course, which I actually need to record these things. But anyway, let's take a quick look at this video. Apologies to my audio listeners. I will just say I will try to describe this to you as best as I can. So, this building, I'm basically renting a collection of offices. I think it's probably most accurate to say. So this room that I'm in here now, I'll tell you what, I'll just show you. So first up on the video, we have the reception area, and there is a front door, there is a roller shutter on there, and I'm not renting this area, so to speak. They kind of use it as a bit of a dumping ground for stuff. It is pretty much empty at the moment. This was recorded a few weeks ago, but there is potential to turn this space into something much more grand. There's the setup that I have here is kind of almost mirrored on the other side, and that is also empty. And there's a proper full kitchen in there. We've got proper toilets in here. It's quite the professional setup, and it all is all quite self-contained as well. So I'm not going to say that I want to open a computer museum. That's a very cliche thing for us tech YouTubers to do, but it's possible. You know, could have a bit of an arcade or whatever. Anyway, let's hit play on this video. So we start off with the reception area. Now, this kind of has urban exploration vibes to it, I think. It's very dark, very run down, very kind of ragged. Apologies for this keeping pausing, by the way. This is me talking my way through this. So we have this first office here. I'm not renting this. I've actually now dumped all of the stuff, which you will see from all of the other offices, into this office. It does have a sink, which is quite useful. I have used that sink quite a lot in my decorating endeavours, and also to fill up my my kettle for my teas and coffees and things. And if we head down the corridor, so this is kind of my whole area here. Yeah, like I say, there's these 1, 2, 3, 4 offices. That fourth office isn't mine. The first one on the left here, this is now full of my stuff. So I have some filing cabinets, which I pilfered from one of the other offices, and a load of really useful boxes. I've got my fridge in there, my microwave, my tea and coffee making facilities in this kind of third smaller office. Haven't done anything with regards to decorating that or anything like that. So we've still got this fantastically grubby and disgusting carpet in here. That has not been the priority at all. And if we continue on from this, come on, Reese, why do you keep rambling so much? There we go. There's this second corner office here. This is now full of my stuff. All of the stuff that you see in here has now gone. And this is 4 meters by 4 meters, this kind of storage room. So I'm renting this to store all of my stuff. I'll be moving all of my racking over from the old studio, getting that set up so I can store all of my stuff in there. But at the minute, it's all kind of strewn about and on the floor. Of course, you will see the before and after in the upcoming video on this. And finally, the third office. I've got all of this corridor cleared out now, by the way, and this door at the end is now shut, so that's good. There's kind of an enormous warehouse the other side of this. But this third office here is the room that I'm currently sat in recording this now. And as you can see, this first day when I got access to this, it was in a bit of a state. There was broken glass all over the floor. Got this horrible old magnolia, grotty magnolia paint all over the walls. Shut up, Reese. Let's go back to the footage. Horrible grotty old magnolia paint all over the walls. We've got those disgusting carpet tiles. That has now all been replaced. We've got the backdrop. We've got the shelving in here. We've got the lighting. I think the bottom row's been flickering while I've been sat here recording this because there's a loose connection somewhere, but whatever. So it has been a monumental amount of work over the past couple of weeks to get moved into this new location, but it has so much potential. So yeah, the storage room and this room are 16 meters square in total, so they're 4 by 4 meters. So I have there about 50% more space than I had in the previous studio, and I've also got that other office which I'm using for storage. So that's potentially really useful space. Longer term, might turn that into some kind of podcast interview thing. Let's switch back to the main camera. Because where I am at the moment is Leamington Spa, which is the home of the British games industry, of course. And I do have contacts. I have contacts at places, some of the kind of the local game development studios. And it is possible that I could potentially, once this place is a bit further down the line and a bit nicer, have a proper interview set up, maybe have some game industry people come here and actually interview them about things. I'll be open for potential public events in future. If people want to come down, maybe do a bit of a LAN party or something here. There's so much potential that I just didn't have at the previous space. So that is that. That's my big news for this week's Ramble. Bit of a bombshell to end on. I have moved the studio, or I'm in the process of moving the studio. But yeah, we're up and running and recording. So that's going to be the priority. Of course, things have been a bit quiet over on the main channel this past month or so, but very much going to get back up and running on that as of this weekend. So thank you ever so much for joining me once more for this week's Ramble. Of course, these go out same time and place every week, 2 minutes to midnight on a Friday night UK time, and that is on YouTube on my second channel, youtube.com/ReeseRambles, and also on the podcast platforms, primarily Spotify, but that is then also syndicated out to a load of others that I don't even know about. And I also have a Discord server, which is where I learn about some of the stuff that I talk about in these rambles, as well as sourcing my own stories, I will say. So big thank yous due this week to Sozzled, to DOSBox, of course, to Vanessa, Naoki, and Koshiak, as well as everyone else who has been discussing that stuff over on the Discord. There is an invitation to join the server down in the description, as well as links to everything else that I have covered in this week's Ramble. But that's all I've got for you for this week. So for the very first time from the brand new studio, all that's left to say is bye.